sambuddhassa buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Blessings, good evening to you all. We're gathered here today partly in honour of the new Buddha statue that's arrived here a couple of days ago at Bodhipala Monastery. It arrived on the full moon day, Asalaha Puja. So a very auspicious day for the Buddha statue to arrive. Came all the way from Thailand, where we made it in a ceremony last January, and then gradually worked its way over to Australia and then to here to Bodhipala Monastery. And a very beautiful and peaceful addition to the monastery. Most Buddhists seem to appreciate statues, their role in just bringing up positive emotions when you see them, or recollecting the qualities of the Buddha when you come to see a statue or bow in front of a statue. It brings up those recollections of the qualities of the Buddha, the great wisdom, the great compassion, and the great purity of mind of the Buddha. Ajahn Chah once said that, if you really bow sincerely to a Buddha statue and recollect the qualities of the Buddha, in that moment it should bring tears to your eyes. Tears of gratitude that this Buddha made the sacrifices that he did to gain enlightenment, to awaken to the truth, and then to teach other people the pathway to enlightenment. And also tears just out of appreciation of our good fortune that we've come into contact with the teachings of the Buddha, that they're still here in the world today, even though he passed into parinibbana 2,500 over years ago. And also just, you might, when you bow to the Buddha and you recollect the fact that you have those same qualities lie within you as a human being. Even if you haven't fully awakened to the truth yet, and you haven't fully brought those qualities out yet, but just having that potential in your own heart is a very great thing. So the name of this Buddha is the peaceful sage of the Sakyans, Pratmaha Sakya Wangsa Muni. And the name was given by Luang Por Park, who's been a great supporter of this monastery and Buddha Bodhivana Monastery in Melbourne. So that's a reflection also, reflecting on the fact that the Buddha was a great sage, a wise being who understood or awakened to the truth of, or the Four Noble Truths: suffering, its origin, the cessation of suffering, and the path of practice leading to the cessation of suffering. And we hear it all the time in Buddhist monasteries, temples, online, in books, to the point where you're probably quite even bored with those words, or just so familiar they don't mean much. But if you took those words away from the world, the teaching of the Buddha on suffering and its origin and its cessation, you took that away from the world, then we would be all missing out. And suddenly you might say the world would be plunged into darkness. You think how bad it is when there's a power cut and your home is plunged into darkness. Imagine if the minds of human beings were plunged into darkness because the teachings on the Four Noble Truths suddenly disappeared from the world. So he was a great sage, and that's why his teachings are still with us today, because they're still relevant, valuable, and they work. They're proven to bring human beings to the end of suffering. It's interesting, originally the Buddha didn't encourage people to make statues. So he said, well, you can, after I'm gone, you can have an empty seat under a Bodhi tree to remind you of me. And if you go to the Bodhi tree in India, Bodh Gaya, well, there's the stone seat representing the place where the Buddha sat and became enlightened. But you can understand the human need just to see some image. It's of course you could say it is an attachment to have an image that you bow to. Well, that's just an attachment, and some people look down on that and think it's like a cult, or just bowing to the God, Buddha like a god. But you can also use a statue as a skillful means, an ubaya, just to recollect the qualities of the Buddha. Whether it's a little Buddha that you hang around your neck, or you put in a car, or on your altar at home, or a big statue like this in a monastery. It's there for a purpose. It's a teaching aid. It's a purpose is to symbolize those qualities. So often people, when they see the Buddha statue, already it makes them peaceful, has a peaceful atmosphere around it. And also it brings up these good qualities, not just gratitude and appreciation, but faith and hiriyottapa and awareness of good and evil. So it's much harder to do unskillful things in the presence of a big Buddha statue. It's harder to argue and fight or steal or exploit one another in front of a Buddha statue. And not impossible, of course. When your mind is deluded, you can do anything anywhere, but it's harder in front of a Buddha statue. So if only for that reason, Buddha statues in the world can have a good effect on people's hearts and minds, help them to be more mindful, more aware of the karma that they're making, good and evil. And many people find them inspiring. You drive along the road in some countries like Thailand and you see a Buddha statue on a hill. It can bring up a good reflection in the middle of your day as you're driving along. Spontaneously you can have a good feeling or remember the Buddha and his teachings. And the statue is reminding us of the Buddha, and then the Buddha told us that he was really only the person who pointed the way to the truth. And what he wanted or encouraged was for us to practice and develop these same qualities that he developed in our own hearts. So he didn't encourage people just to believe blindly, follow him blindly. He discouraged that. He said these teachings have to be taken away and practiced with, put to the test. You have to really know the truth through your own experience, for them to be of value. And the Buddha can't do that for you, so he can only point the way. But he can't make you practice, he can't make you enlightened. So the Buddha statue is simply part of that process, pointing to the Dhamma, helping you to remember the teachings, bringing up certain skillful thoughts and attitudes. But the next step, of course, is for us to practice. So we also use the Buddha statues, and we bow to the statue and we make, sometimes we make determinations. We say, I'm going to practice meditation now. You bow to the statue and you meditate in front of it. And you can use a statue that way, just to help you gather your energy together, make your mind determined to do something good. It could be an offering of dana or keeping precepts. When we take precepts in a formal way, we always say Buddhang Saranang Gacchami first. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, the Sangha. When we meditate, often we bow to the Buddha first, just remembering the teacher and the teachings, and the Sangha, those who have practiced the teachings and realized the truth. So it sets us on our way when we see the Buddha statue, or we bow to it, or we meditate in front of it. But then we have to bring up these qualities in our own heart through our practice. And we call it cultivating the Dhamma. We're cultivating the Dhamma, meaning cultivating the truth until we see it and know it for ourselves. So we have this saying, one who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. One who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha. And the Buddha and the Dhamma are the same thing, synonymous. So there's the Buddha on the outside, the statue or the historical Buddha. But then we have the Buddha on the inside, these qualities and the mind that awakens to truth, awakens to the Dhamma. That is really the Buddha on the inside. So again, Ajahn Chah said that you're questioning, do you really need to go to India to see the Buddha? And people go on pilgrimage to India to see where the Buddha was enlightened in Bodh Gaya, and that can be a very inspiring thing to do. But really, if you practice well, wherever you are in this world, you can see the Buddha or know the Buddha on the inside through your practice. And the Buddha can arise in any country, so it can arise here in Australia if you apply these teachings and cultivate the Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. You can get to know the Buddha on the inside, wherever you are. So the true Buddha is this enlightened wisdom that we aspire to and cultivate through our practice, opening our hearts and minds through the practice, developing mindfulness and then reflecting on the truth. And then we come to see the same things that the Buddha saw, same insights, have the same experience or similar experience of seeing that the cause of suffering is what we call mental defilement, rooted in greed, anger, delusion, coming from ignorance, from not understanding the truth. And the way out of suffering and way beyond suffering is abandoning greed, anger and delusion. Abandoning ignorance by bringing up knowledge. And this kind of knowledge comes through developing our mind in mindfulness and insight. So we say it's a process of waking up. And it's another way we call the Buddha. The Buddha is the awakened one. And we're following the Buddha, waking up our mind on the inside, awakening to the truth. And when we practice meditation, you'll notice when you lose your mindfulness, you start getting lost in a train of thought, or many trains of thoughts, that's where you lose your awakened state of mind. You lose the mind of the Buddha, and you go back into the mind of mental defilements, trains of thought, imagination, fantasy, random thoughts, or very strong emotions. Often different stressful emotions come up, and it takes us away from the present moment. So we're lost, we get lost in our thoughts and in our moods. So we can lose that awakened state very easily, very quickly. And what you notice is that once you lose the awakened state of the mind, you start to suffer. Once mindfulness is gone, then you can think anything. And some of those thoughts are just kind of random thoughts conditioned by past karma popping into your mind, but sometimes they're very strong negative thoughts, negative mental states, rooted in greed, anger, delusion, fear, worry, stubbornness, conceit, pride, arrogance. There's a whole list of them the Buddha gave. But when we lose our mindfulness and lose our wisdom, we tend to get caught into more unskillful states of mind, and we end up suffering. And quite often we don't even know where the suffering has come from, because we lost our awareness and our awakened state. Ajahn Chah used to say, when you lose your mindfulness, it's like you die for a few moments. You become like a ghost for a few moments. Your mind is just floating around and you're not really sure where it is and what you're thinking. You're only half aware. And of course it's a dangerous or risky way to be, because you can think anything. Your mind tends to go in, when it's deluded, when it's not awake, then it tends to go in the way of negativity. So we become caught into fears and anxieties, irritation, anguish, or just obsessive greed, addictions. So if you lose your mindfulness for a moment, then you will die for a moment. But if you lose it for many moments, many minutes, you've died for a few minutes there. And there's no mindfulness or wisdom guiding you at that moment. You've lost the Buddha inside. And your mind just sort of floating around. Who knows where it will settle? Like a leaf on the wind, it just settles anywhere depending on which way the wind is blowing and how strong the wind is. And so the Buddha compared our experience as human beings with the winds, the 8 worldly winds, gain and loss, praise and blame, status, loss of status, pleasure and pain. And these experiences are blowing us from side to side, from all directions, all the time. And we need to make our mind strong and steady, like a tree in the wind. If it's got strong roots and it's a strong base, then it won't blow over. But if our minds are weak, we lose our awakened state of mindfulness and our intelligence is not working, then we just get blown around by these experiences in life. So like a ghost, or the mind just wanders around, floating around, not sure where to land, where to go. So we need to train it, practice, make the mind strong like the Buddha. That's another benefit of having a big, solid, peaceful Buddha statue, is that it gives that reminder that the Buddha's mind was solid, stable. He cultivated the path. His morality, he was grounded in stable morality. His conduct was not harmful to others or himself. His mindfulness, his effort was strong, his samadhi was strong, and his insight and wisdom was strong. So he wasn't blown around by the worldly winds, the ups and downs of life. So when you see the Buddha statue unmoving, solid, again it's reminding you to bring up the qualities of mindfulness and wisdom so that you can cope with the different worldly winds that will blow you around every day. The words of other people, the feelings in your body, pleasure and pain, the ups and downs of work, family life, relationships, the economy, the world. All these things are what we call the worldly winds blowing us around, and we need something solid in the middle to deal with that. Otherwise every little thing upsets us and we suffer, and our mind goes off on another little period of floating around, another train of thought floating around without mindfulness. So somebody tells us how good we are, praises us for some work or something that we've done, we're happy for a while. That person or someone else criticizes us and then we're down, unhappy, depressed. Just a few words from another person can change our state of mind so quickly. That's because we've lost our mindfulness, our solidity. We're no longer with the mind of the Buddha. We're now in the mind of just floating around like a leaf on the wind. Of course, even a Buddha statue is prone to the worldly winds. Like we brought this statue in, it's got a couple of little blemishes on it from the travel, because it came in a container all the way from Thailand, so basically it's unblemished, but there's just a couple of little scratches on it. But taking Luang Por Chah's wisdom, those two little scratches are reminding us that a Buddha statue is just expressing the truth, that everything is impermanent, all conditioned things are impermanent, changeable. So you make a really beautiful, solid Buddha statue, well, it still can get scratched. And you don't need to suffer with that, you just know, well, that's the impact of a long journey, and metal is not immune from scratches. Paintwork can have a little bit of a scratch. It's just reminding us that the teachings of the Buddha are true. If you have enough mindfulness and you can think like that, then there's no suffering, even with a scratch on your beautiful new Buddha statue. Our mind is the same. If you're seeing the truth, then your ego doesn't need to feel bruised when somebody criticizes you. You just know, this criticism has come my way, maybe it's true, maybe not. You establish mindfulness and you just reflect on it. When you're mindful, you can do that. When you lose your mindfulness, you get caught into your reaction. You suffer with their words. A few words and off we go. like the leaf just floating in the wind again. Every time I see a new Buddha statue like this one, I always remember the teaching from Luang Por Sao, who was Luang Por Man's teacher. Luang Por Man is the one behind me, the monk you can see on the picture on the wall. And his teacher, Luang Por Sao, he used to live in a monastery on an island in the Moon River, which is in Ubon, northeast Thailand. And it's a very small little island that became a hermitage, a place for a sanctuary for monks to practice. Had a bit of forest there, and they used to get hunters come over because there was forest. They'd come over in boats and sneak around to see what they could shoot. And the hunters didn't like the monks living there because it kind of made it difficult for them to hunt, and they felt a bit guilty probably. So to try and remind the hunters that it was a monastery, Luang Por Sao had the monks build a huge Buddha statue, much bigger than this one, out of concrete. It's kind of moulded on one end of the island, so every boat that went past would see it. And one of the monks was like an artist, so he was really good at it. He made a beautiful, large Buddha statue, and many of the people going up and down the river on boats liked it because it made them feel good to see the Buddha. They felt, it brings up the faith, the positive emotions, and that's the value of a Buddha statue. But the hunters didn't like it because it reminded them that they were making bad karma, killing, and that the monks were kind of living on this island. So one time Luang Por Sao and the monks went off wandering in the forest somewhere else. And while they were gone, the hunters sneaked into the monastery and they got a chisel and they chipped off the face of the Buddha out of spite. They were annoyed seeing the Buddha there, so they chipped the face off. And the villagers got to know, because they saw every day that as they went past in their boats. So the word got around to the monks, to the villagers, this Buddha has been damaged. And then everyone was wondering what Luang Por Sao would say when he came back. And the day he arrived back, had a huge group of monks with him, and so they had a few boats lined up on the shore, and they went across the river in a procession of boats to cross to the other side, and they'd have to round the corner where the Buddha statue was. So everyone was waiting to see what would Luang Por Sao say. Would he get angry and get upset and blame the people who have damaged the Buddha? They're all waiting to see. And as the boat came round the corner, Luang Por Sao looked up and he saw the damaged face of the big Buddha statue. And everyone was waiting. Was he going to get angry? What was he going to say? And he just turned to the monk, the artist monk who had made the statue, and said, "Oh, looks like they've given you some more work to do. You made a beautiful Buddha once, you can make another beautiful Buddha." So he wasn't angry or upset. He just had a very peaceful, mindful state of mind and just passed on the duty to the monk to just repair it. So if you see the Buddha on the inside, not just the Buddha on the outside, then when things go wrong or things happen, you don't have to get upset or suffer. You just maintain mindfulness and reflect, things are like that. Unfortunately, sometimes people even vandalize statues, or things break, things scratch, things get lost. Life doesn't go the way you want it. That's because you can't control everything. But if you can keep your mindfulness and not let your mind get lost in its reactions and moods, then things arise and pass away and you just deal with them the best you can. You don't have to suffer with it, you don't have to get angry or upset or sad or depressed. Of course, there are many challenges in life, and some things are very difficult to meet. Some of those challenges really knock us. But still, the way of practice remains the same, to try and maintain mindfulness and reflect wisely on whatever it is that's happening in your life. Even when things go wrong, when we fall out with other people, or we lose our job, or we get diagnosed with some horrible illness, or maybe just getting old, get old and your body aches, and your eyes going, and your hearing's going, whatever it may be. These are all just part of life, and life is not always under our control, it's not always predictable. But what do? You keep your mindfulness and you keep alert and awake like a Buddha to deal with whatever comes next. And you can't predict what will come next, but you keep these qualities in mind, you practice, develop your mind in a strong way, a good way. Then whatever life brings you, you'll deal with it the best way you can. Another way they talk about the Buddha, they say, is as we chant, we say the Buddha is the peaceful chief of conquerors. So some people kind of look at the Buddha as some kind of domineering kind of power figure. But when what they mean by peaceful chief of conquerors is like he conquered his mind, conquered the mental defilements and all the obstacles to enlightenment through his own efforts, through his own training. He didn't have to go and conquer another person. He just conquered his own mind, his own delusions, attachments, greed, anger. And that's the real victory of a Buddha, the mind of a Buddha or an enlightened, awakened being, is that they've tamed the mind to the point where the mindfulness and insight is strong, that they don't follow the ways of suffering anymore. They don't follow the way of greed or anger anymore because they know that leads to suffering. They've given it up. They don't hold on to anger. So the Buddha is a reminder that human beings can live without anger, without hatred, without greed and attachment. So he's like the real victor, the real conqueror of the world, simply by knowing the world, not by going out and physically conquering the world, just knowing the way the world is and not getting deluded by it. That's a much more valuable kind of victory, and that each one of us has to do that for ourselves through our practice. And the Buddha said it's easier to go and conquer someone else, invade another country, or fight another person, argue with someone, or physically fight with someone. That's the easy way. The hard way to victory is actually getting to know your own mind and letting go of your own anger, your own greed. And that's what the Buddha stands for. That's what the Buddha is reminding us to do. Every time you see the statue, you're reminded that human beings can let go of greed, anger, delusion. Human beings can cultivate wisdom, mindfulness, compassion. So it's up to us. It's up to us to do that, practice that. So this is a very happy time for this monastery, Bodhipala Monastery. We have a new Buddha statue to remind us of the Buddha and who the Buddha was and what he practiced and the truths that he was pointing to. So we hope that it will be a cause for much happiness to arise in your hearts and in the hearts of future generations, people who come here, visit the monastery. It can be a source of their happiness too. So I'll leave you with these words tonight.
Hantamayang uvadakata sadukarang tatamasi Sadhu, 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 adamodha